The maintenance shaft threading through Olympus Base's western sector pulsed with the heat of the colony's power core. Its steel walls slick with condensation as Major Angel Ghost Mason edged toward her target. Her battle suit's matte black surface scraped faintly against the tunnel's confines, HUD glowing a dim green in the shadowed crawlspace. 10 meters from the core chamber, the heart of the Krax's occupation. 50 meters east, the cargo hold held 200 hostages, their freedom hinging on the chaos she was about to unleash. The air thrummed with the core's strain, a low growl she'd turn into a scream. "Echo, scan the cooling lines," she whispered, flattening herself beside a grate overlooking the chamber. Her augmented vision pierced the gloom. The core towered below, a cylindrical monolith of orange-glowing conduits, its surface radiating heat that fogged her visor's edges. Analyzing, primary coolant pipes located 2 meters above core housing. Weld stressed, breach viable. Overload projected in 90 seconds post-sabotage, Echo replied, her HUD highlighting the pipes in blue, thick and taut, snaking upward from the core's base. Ghost traced their joints, weak points she'd exploit. She pried the grate loose with her suit's strength servos, the metal yielding with a muted groan under her 1,000-kilo grip. Slipping through, she dropped onto a narrow platform 12 meters above the chamber floor, her microthrusters hissing softly to cushion the fall, HUD steady. Pulse at 128, environmental controls active. The heat washed over her like a furnace blast, sweat beading beneath her suit as she edged toward the coolant pipes, their surfaces shimmering with condensation. Below, a Krax technician lumbered past, its crimson armor dulled by grime, oblivious to the shadow overhead. Its helm tilted toward a console, claws tapping lazily. "Chameleon coding now," she murmured, her voice a steel thread in the core's drone. "Activating. 30 seconds online," Echo confirmed, her suit shimmering into invisibility as she leapt, maglocks clamping onto the pipes with a faint clink. The technician's head jerked up, amber eyes narrowing, but Ghost was already moving. Her enhanced reflexes, 5 times human speed, carrying her along the pipe's length before it could pinpoint her. She reached the junction. A sealed valve, its weld cracked from the core's relentless strain. Perfect. Her hands gripped the valve, servos whirring as she summoned her full strength. 1,000 kilos of force twisting the metal. It shrieked, a jet of superheated vapor hissing past her visor, stinging her exposed skin through the suit's seals. She yanked harder, the pipe rupturing with a deafening crack. Coolant sprayed in a frigid plume, flash-freezing patches of the platform below. Core temperature spiking, overload in 87 seconds. Her HUD blared, red alerts pulsing as the chamber's lights dimmed, then flared red. Klaxons erupted, their wail piercing the air and reverberating through Olympus Base's steel skeleton. Ghost's signal to move. The technician below roared, slamming its claws against the console in a frantic bid to stem the breach, its guttural curses lost in the din. Core failure. Echo translated as Krax warriors stormed in from a lower hatch. Their crimson armor clanked, shields flickering on in panic bursts, and they surged toward the coolant spill, plasma rifles swinging wildly. Ghost dropped back to the platform, her cloak fading at 26 seconds, flattening herself against the wall as their shouts echoed. "Seal it. Find the breach." The chaos spread fast. Alarms blared beyond the chamber, lights flickering across the base as the power core's instability rippled outward. Her HUD tracked the response. Thermal signatures scattering west, Krax patrols abandoning posts to converge on the core, their sloppy discipline crumbling under pressure. She smirked faintly, a rare crack in her steel resolve. Their arrogance had left them blind, and she'd just lit the fuse. The cargo hold was 50 meters east, its guards likely thinning now, distracted by the sirens and the core's ominous rumble. She slipped back into the shaft, pulling the grate shut with a quiet clang, her suit's servos steadying her as she crawled eastward. The tunnel shook, dust sifting from the ceiling, the overload clock ticking down. 62 seconds. The Krax response was swift but chaotic, warriors barking orders, turrets twitching as power fluctuated, their focus yanked away from the hostages. Ghost's HUD painted their retreat in red blips, a gap opening in the eastern quadrant. Exactly what she'd planned. The vent ahead loomed, her path to the cargo hold clear. She'd hit them in the confusion, invisible and unstoppable. The base's power core groaned behind her, a beast she'd wounded, and the Krax were scrambling to save it, leaving their prisoners exposed. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, her implant steadying her pulse at 130. The diversion was live, and the next move was hers. The tunnels of Olympus base shuddered as the power core's overload timer ticked down. 46 seconds, Echo warned, klaxons wailing through the steel corridors like a wounded beast's cry. Major Angel Ghost, Mason moved swiftly, her battlesuit's servos humming as she reached the ventilation shaft above the cargo hold, the eastern quadrant's prison now 50 meters from the sabotaged core. Her HUD pulsed with the chaos she'd unleashed. Lights flickering, Krax thermal signatures scattering west toward the breach, their overconfidence unraveling in the face of her strike. The hold's guards would be rattled. She'd hit them now in the gap. Chameleon coating now, she whispered, flattening against the shaft's cold steel. Activating. 30 seconds online, Echo replied, her suit shimmering into invisibility as she pried the grate loose with a servo-powered tug, the metal yielding silently. She dropped, micro-thrusters hissing to soften her landing behind a stack of crates in the cargo hold. A cavernous bay turned cage, its chain-link pens holding 200 civilians under dying lights. Her HUD tracked the scene. For Krax guards, their crimson armor glinting, rifles gripped tighter as the alarm screamed, their helms swiveling toward the western rumble. 25 seconds, her cloak ticked. Ghost darted to the roving guard first. Its shield flickered, back turned, and struck, her enhanced speed, 5 times human, driving a fist into its neck joint with 1,000 kilos of force. Armor cracked, a muffled gurgle escaping its helm as she swept its legs, dropping it soundlessly to the deck. The hostages stirred, wide-eyed gasps swallowed by the klaxons, hope flickering in their pale faces. She moved, a shadow on the wind. The guard by the entrance still faced west, its posture tense but oblivious. 18 seconds, her HUD warned. She closed the gap in 2 strides, wrist laser firing a pinpoint beam to slice its shield generator in half, sparks flaring as she tackled it, slamming its helm into the floor with a dull thud. It twitched once, then stilled. 12 seconds. The pen's 2 guards reacted late, one swinging its rifle as she blurred forward, her cloak fading at 8 seconds. She leapt, a servo-powered kick shattering its sensor node. Plasma seared the air, missing wide, and it crumpled blind and roaring. The last guard fired, a wild shot scorching the ceiling as Ghost ducked, grabbing the barrel mid-swing. Her strength ripped it free, hurling the Krax into a crate with a sickening crunch of armor. The hold fell silent save for the alarms and the hostages' ragged breaths, their eyes locked on her, some in awe, others in terror, as she stood chest heaving over the fallen guards. "Stay calm," she barked, her voice cutting through the din. "We're moving, small groups to the pods." "Core overload in 30 seconds, Echo warned, the floor trembling beneath her boots. She tore the pen gate open, servos shredding the chain link with a screech, and waved the first group forward. 10 strong, scientists and workers stumbling toward the southern maintenance hatch she'd scouted. "Go now," she ordered, her HUD tracking their path as they vanished into the tunnel, clutching each other like lifelines. The base quaked harder, dust sifting from the ceiling. 22 seconds. She turned to the next cluster, an elderly man limping, a woman cradling a sprained arm, a teenage boy pale but steely-eyed. No time to hesitate. Ghost scooped the old man into her arms, his weight negligible against her suit's 1,000-kilo strength, and steadied the woman with her free hand. "Move," she snapped, guiding them to the hatch as the boy darted alongside, his breath quick but resolute. She set the man down inside, his wheeze faint against the alarms, and spun back. 15 seconds. Families shuffled forward next, a mother clutching a child, a scientist with a torn coat rallying others. She waved them on, voice raw. "Single file, keep going." The hold emptied fast, 80 through, more filing into the tunnel as the core's rumble grew into a growl, shaking the walls. 10 seconds, Echo pressed, her HUD glowing a route southwest. 50 meters to hangar, auxiliary pods prepped for orbit. Ghost grabbed a straggler, a scientist with a twisted ankle, his face etched with pain, and hoisted him over her shoulder, his groan muffled as she pushed the last group through. Parents, kids, workers clinging to hope. "Run," she shouted, the base's steel groaning under the strain. 5 seconds. She followed, the scientist's weight a steady burden, the tunnel narrowing as she guided them deeper, away from the hold, toward the hangar. Her HUD tracked the exodus. 100 through, the rest closing in, their footsteps a frantic echo against the klaxons. The cargo hold faded behind her. Empty pens, broken guards, a testament to her strike, but the clock was merciless, the core's overload a heartbeat away. She'd gotten them this far. Now it was about getting them out. The tunnel walls shook, a final tremor as the power core's alarms peaked. Overload imminent, Echo warned, her voice cutting through the chaos. Ghost pressed on, her implants steadying her pulse at 134, the hangar's promise driving her forward, 50 meters to freedom, to pods that would lift them into space, beyond the Krax's reach. The base was fracturing, and she was the fracture's edge, unseen, unstoppable, their last chance breaking through the dark. The cargo hold in Olympus base's eastern quadrant stood eerily silent as Commander Vor'thak stormed through its shattered entrance, his massive battle armor thudding against the cracked deck. The air still rang with the fading echo of klaxons, the power core's overload, sabotaged minutes ago, leaving a haze of burned ozone and flickering lights in its wake. His crimson plates gleamed under the dim emergency glow, casting jagged shadows across the empty chain-link pens where 200 hostages had been caged. Now, only 4 Krax guards lay sprawled in broken heaps, armor dented, shields dead, lifeless husks of his once-vaunted warriors. His scarred snout twitched, a guttural snarl rumbling deep in his chest as rage coiled like a living thing. "Report," he bellowed, his voice a seismic blast that shook loose dust from the ceiling, the base's steel groaning under the strain of its wounded systems. A subordinate scurried forward, its crest flattened in abject submission, claws clutching a cracked data slate smeared with grime. "Blade of the Dominion," it rasped, voice trembling as Echo's translation would have rendered it cold and precise. The thrall's gone. The core breach drew patrols west, guards overwhelmed. No Earth forces detected. Vor'thak's claw lashed out, seizing the slate and splintering its edge with a crunch, shoving the warrior back with enough force to stagger it. Overwhelmed? By nothing. He stomped to the nearest guard's corpse, kicking it over with a sneer. The helm rolled free, revealing a crushed neck joint, a strike too precise for Krax weapons. His amber eyes narrowed, rage simmering as he scanned the hold. Pens torn open, crates toppled, the air thick with the scent of coolant and defeat. This wasn't a raid, it was a single blade, slipped through his grasp. "Security feeds, bring them," he growled, slamming the slate onto a crate, its surface denting under his claw's weight. The subordinate fumbled, its trembling claws tapping until the screen flickered to life, grainy footage scrolling up, time-stamped mere minutes ago. The hold appeared intact at first, hostages cowering, guards pacing. Then a blur streaked across the frame, too fast for the camera's sluggish sensors. The roving guard dropped, neck shattered. The entrance guard fell, shield sparking out. One by the pens fired wildly, crumbling mid-shot. The last crashed into a crate, a fleeting shadow materializing as it struck. The pens emptied in seconds, civilians fleeing south, the blur vanishing into the base's tunnels. Vor'thak leaned closer, his crest flaring as he looped the feed, claws digging into the crate, wood splintering beneath his grip. "One human," he spat, the words venomous, alien on his tongue. "One Earth filth dares this?" The subordinate shrank back, its voice a whimper. "The core sabotage, it masked their escape. We thought. You thought nothing." Vor'thak roared, hurling the broken slate against the wall, sparks raining as it shattered into fragments. "You let a ghost slip through my base, my conquest." His bellow shook the hold, drowning the fading alarms, and he wheeled toward the comm panel near the entrance, slamming a claw onto its controls. The base-wide channel crackled open, his voice thundering through every corridor, every chamber. "All units, this is Vor'thak. The thralls are stolen by one human defiler. Find it. Kill it. Now!" The klaxons shifted pitch, their wail deepening into a lockdown alert. Blast doors rumbled shut across Olympus base, sealing tunnels and hatches with a series of bone-rattling clangs. Lights dimmed to a blood-red haze, automated turrets whirring to life, their sensors sweeping every shadowed corner. Vor'thak stood amidst the tightening trap, his massive frame heaving, scarred snout twisting into a sneer as the base bent to his will. He'd crushed worlds, raised colonies. This speck of defiance, this lone human, dared to mock him on his own ground? His mind churned, replaying the footage. The speed, the precision, a shadow too swift for his warrior's brutish strength. A soldier, enhanced beyond Earth's norms, trained to strike and fade. "Ghost," he muttered, the word a hiss, fitting the phantom that taunted him. He'd hunt it down, crush its bones, parade its wreckage before Earth's trembling eyes. Let them see the cost of crossing Vor'thak. The lockdown clamped tighter, patrols doubling, sensors recalibrating. Every vent, every shaft now a snare waiting to snap. The cargo hold's silence mocked him, its empty pens a wound to his pride. His rage burned white-hot, a storm held only by the certainty of revenge. This ghost wouldn't slip away again. Not alive.